Want to turn to the other big story here in Canberra today, and that's the budget bottom line. Some better news on the budget bottom line. This relates to last year's budget. Today we saw the final budget outcome for the 2018-19 financial year, which originally was meant to be, forecast to be a deficit of more than $14 billion. It's come in on the final numbers as, well, just in the red, but only just, less than $1 billion, $690 million deficit. A balanced budget, essentially. Certainly that's what Treasurer Josh Frydenberg is calling it, and well and truly on track to deliver the surplus this financial year that they promised at the election. Labor, however, says we're only seeing this better news because of a big underspend on the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
The Treasurer upbeat as he reveals the 2018-19 final budget outcome.
The budget is back in balance for the first time in 11 years.
Josh Frydenberg revealing a deficit of just $690 million for the last financial year, better than the $4.2 billion deficit predicted in April. It's driven by a boost in corporate profits, income tax receipts and stronger iron ore prices.
The Australian economy is strong and ready for the challenges ahead.
But the final budget outcome shows signs the economy may be losing steam, with GST revenue and company tax receipts down since the last update in April. Government spending has also fallen, down $2.7 billion, largely due to an underspend on the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
This is in part because of the delays in some of the states coming on board.
Labor says it's the government delaying the provision of NDIS services.
The Morrison government is propping up their budget by shortchanging Australians with a disability.
At no point has our government made a policy decision to cut funding to the NDIS.
The Coalition claims the underspend is due to lower than expected demand.
Is that the NDIS is constipated. Mr Morrison struts in Parliament and says, oh, listen, it's a demand-driven program, and the reason why we've been able to pocket $4.6 billion is because the demand isn't there. Well, that's just a lie.
The government began the day welcoming the first balanced budget in 11 years. But just hours later, there was bad news on the economic front, with the nation's unemployment level rising to 5.3%, hitting a 12-month high. Full-time jobs fell by 15,000, but were offset by a rise of over 50,000 part-time jobs.
Since we got re-elected by the Australian people, more than 1,000 jobs have been created a day.
Economists predict it may trigger action on rates.
And it does put pressure on the Reserve Bank again to think about what they may do next. Obviously, it increases the chance that we'll see further interest rate cuts.
Trudy McIntosh, Sky News, Canberra.
As Trudy mentions, yes, there is a big underspend there on the NDIS, $4.6 billion based on what they thought they were going to spend. Why is that? Well, we heard the Minister, Stuart Robert, Minister for the NDIS, telling Parliament today that's because there are about 100,000 people they thought were going to be in the scheme that aren't. He insists the amount they're spending, even per person, is going up when it comes to the NDIS. Labor has a very different view, and we did speak to Bill Shorten, now the Shadow Minister for the NDIS, about this. He argues the problem is, well, very long delays, can be up to 12 months between applying to get into the NDIS and actually receiving the funds. The underspend, and this isn't the first time this has happened, he argues, instead of going back into the budget bottom line, into what's called consolidated revenue and helping the budget bottom line, he reckons that money, this $4.6 billion, should go into a separate fund, a locked box, essentially, that can then be used for the NDIS down the track.
One idea they could look at is putting it in an account. Right. And if people aren't spending their money because they're not getting the approval, or if there aren't the services in the towns where they live and they can't spend all their package, rather than Mr Frydenberg and Mr Morrison squirreling that money and pretending that all the demand's being met.
Well, it's not fixed policy from Labor, but he did tell us that's something they looked at before the election when he was the leader.